Sarah, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. So, you are one of the many people I have politely coerced to join me on my show through the wonders of Instagram. So, I appreciate you taking that random DM.
Yeah, Instagram has been like the wild west of unexpected, like amazing connections. When I started Instagram, I never thought it would actually be a like funnel for my business, but
Right.
I've met amazing professionals. Most of my clients come from Instagram, so I appreciate the DMs on Instagram. So
Oh
it's
my gosh,
nice.
that's so cool. Well, maybe afterwards I will buy you a coffee or pay you your fee to give me some tips on getting Instagram turnover into clients. That's pretty cool. That's actually interesting. Sorry for we've already gone on a tangent, but that could be, is that another piece of your business where in addition to executive functioning?
Like business work, like helping people with business work.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, that's a huge thing to be able to help people to translate social media into, clients.
Yeah, no, I haven't quite ventured that route. A lot of my clients are like entrepreneurs, side hustle growers, like busy
Hmm.
women who are juggling lots of things. And so, sometimes I am helping people with like those professional goals, and sometimes it is like starting their side hustle so that they can have more free time or shift
Yeah.
away from a full-time job. But no, that's my, yeah, we've already gone down this tangent, but no, my career is like really ebbed and flowed and changed over the years, and so I'm open to whatever comes my way.
That's such a big thing. So I just, at the time of recording, 2 days ago, got back from the Purdue Women's Conference. I went to Purdue for undergrad for business. And I was a speaker there talking about navigating, the intersection of mental health and mental well-being and career. And that was the biggest, every person, including myself, it was already on my slides before I left Texas to get to Indiana, but every single person talked about, they actually used the word pivot except one, and she talked about being open to change, which I think falls perfectly into the Ross Geller pivot of it all. um, which I love that I was like, is everyone familiar with that scene in Friends? And people laughed. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, time is of the essence, but it's never too late to change. And I
Mhm.
wonder sometimes if we're a little rigid in our thinking of, it's too late, I'm almost 40, or it's too late, I'm almost insert age here, or I've put so much into this thing already that it's hard for me to walk away from. I understand sunk costs are definitely an emotional piece as well. And that, you know, that mindset of growth and abundance can be hard to get to, and the willingness to pivot as well.
That's so well put. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sometimes we're forced to pivot. And so we adjust when that like external force comes to us. And
Mhm.
then I think for my like speaking for myself, like I had an unexpected opportunity to pivot. So my background is I have a master's in social work. I used to work in the nonprofit world. That
Mhm.
was my like dream job. And I always thought that that would be like my full-time career was being a social worker. And COVID was my pivot.
Yes.
So I had always done coaching, executive function coaching. I started back in 2014. So I've been coaching now for 10 years, which is like
Wow.
wild to say out loud.
2014 does not feel that long ago, and it is absolutely a decade ago, and both of those things cannot resonate at the same time in my brain.
Yeah, it like somehow doesn't math. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had started doing coaching right out of undergrad. My undergrad is psychology.
Mhm.
And so I always knew I wanted to be in like the helping profession, right? Like whatever that was going to look like.
Right.
So I started coaching with an agency as like a part-time job while I was doing my first undergrad job. And I just loved coaching so much. And that's what like kind of led me into social work was like I wanted to be able to work with people on a deeper level.
Mhm.
Like not just the concrete stuff, but like really get to the emotions and like really a lot of that mental health work.
Mhm.
Um, but I just like kept coaching
Mhm.
while doing my social work stuff, and COVID became my like official pivot into becoming a full-time executive function coach and like launching my business and like
Mhm.
stepping away from social work. It definitely guides my practice a lot, like that understanding of mental health. Like you said, it's in all aspects of our life, and especially in our careers. And so to be able to work with people and understand, how anxiety, depression, life changes, ADHD, other diagnoses
Mhm.
impact their executive functioning,
Mhm.
um, definitely guides my work. But I've taken off my therapist, counselor, social worker
Right.
hat,
Yeah.
made the full pivot.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful that I've been able to do that, and that Instagram has connected me with such amazing people, like so unexpected.
Yeah, I love that story so much. And again, it comes back to, because of course this is the Perinatal Podcast. And I know when we first talked, you're like, so tell me a little more about like executive functioning and parenthood. And I was like, honestly, so I was in a training years ago. I was still breastfeeding my daughter. I had had a son, 23 months before that to the day, before she was born. So I had been off my ADHD medications for a long time. I had just kind of, it's so funny as a social worker, as a therapist myself, the things that, I mean, I never ascribed to anybody like, hey guys, I'm so perfect. Listen to me and let me tell you all the things I do. But as a mental health professional, it was really interesting to me to see how much I had allowed my ADHD, my executive functioning, all of those skills to kind of just languish as I navigated motherhood and COVID and pregnancy and fertility struggles and all that. And I was in a training, and I had just a week before gone to my primary provider, which if you're able to access a psychiatrist, I do certainly encourage you that as well, but that's a whole other story for a whole other podcast. Um, and he and I had a good rapport, and I was like, I've just been so anxious. I've just like, I can't turn things off. I'm in this space, whatever, whatever. And we had talked about maybe getting me on some sort of medication, perhaps an SSRI. But we hadn't landed on anything yet. I was still breastfeeding. I was like, it's nothing that is a concern that is worth me stopping that trajectory that I had in mind. But I was really stressed about it. And I was in this training. I mean, it was days later, and this slide came up, and they talked about how unmanaged ADHD or variable attention stimulus trait, or just distractibility in general, right? I think we all have that to some degree. Unmanaged ADHD manifests as anxiety. And I literally was just sitting there with my hands on my face. For those who are not on video, I'm watching on YouTube, like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I'm not actually saying that, of course, but like, podcast is an audio medium. And literally the other presenter who was sitting down was like, Meg, are you okay? And I literally told them the story. It's like, I have been so stressed. I have been so anxious. Everything has felt so out of hand. I literally just asked my primary provider to put me on something. And this really feels like what it is. And there are other mitigating factors too. It's not all one thing, of course. Very rarely is any one thing all one thing. I say that all the time. But it was wild. And of course, I was still breastfeeding my daughter, and I would for another 6 months. But that has been such an interesting thing for me. It's not even just the medication, but then thinking about the executive functioning and the things that I was doing to organize myself, even with or without the medication, and all of that together. And it's so interesting to me how many of my clients come to me and say how anxious they are, da, da, da. And then we get on this distractibility conversation, and I'm like, unmanaged ADHD manifests a lot of times as anxiety, and they're the same way, like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So sorry for my very long ramble, but it's been such an interesting journey for me, how I've gone from specializing specifically in perinatal to I'm getting my certified clinical services provider for ADHD training, got 2 more classes almost done. And that really is more my focus now, because parent or not, but especially parents, the distractibility piece is just so prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's an important thing to point out. And I think something I always tell clients, and I talk about a lot, is that like the foundation of our executive functioning
Mhm.
is our self-talk, our self-care, and our mental health. And
Mhm.
so I think a lot of times, like, people who come to coaching are usually in therapy, which is great. I think we all deserve that support and resource.
Yes.
And they've been working on processing the emotions, the self-talk, like really
Mhm.
doing that like heavy emotional work. And
Right.
then they're okay, now I need some concrete tools to go
Right.
with, because like I'm aware of what it feels like. And I can name, the emotion, or I can like pinpoint what that looks like in my day-to-day life. But then like, do I, in addition to therapy coping strategies, what else do I do? Like, how do I, juggle all the plates of, what's for dinner, keeping up with laundry, making decisions for myself and other people, like keeping all the plates spinning at work, like finding time for rest. Like, how do you create a system to manage your time, prioritize, organize, like thoughts and physical stuff? So I think that like mental health piece and like toolbox piece like needs to come together. It can't be one or the other. Yeah.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that is a really interesting thing to talk about, kind of the difference between therapy and coaching, where therapy is sometimes we're unpacking things. And with mine, I'm very clear to all of my clients. I love solution focused therapy. I love talking about where we're going. But then also too, the idea of the coaching piece where you're really, it's like, we're not unpacking any past traumas. We're not figuring out the who's and the whys and the what's of it. We're really trying to get into creating that system, making it feel unique and special for you so that it is worth putting in that effort. And then how do we sustain that? How do we implement that into our life and then sustain that?
That's the biggest thing, like keeping it a realistic system so that it's like you don't go through a honeymoon period. Because I think sometimes we're like quick to be like, okay, I'm ready to make a change. I want to make a drastic one. I want to like overhaul my life, and I want it to happen immediately. And like that can last for like, the little window, the honeymoon period, but then it's not what normal life looks like typical life. And so it's like, how can you create a system or a toolbox that when things pop up, your schedule changes, you have, things that are outside of your control, that you can adjust the system to fit what your life really looks like. And I think that's like one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people is like, you find what you think is that like magic tool of like, this is working for me, and it works until something happens, like whether that's like 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, but like something changes and then the system just like stops working or like it drops off. And so then they're like, how do I go back to doing something that was working for me? Or how do I like readjust so that I can figure out a new system? Yeah. So yeah, the keeping it realistic and sustainable, I think is imperative.
Right. And that's with so many things, right? We have these ideas, we want it to be overnight. We appreciate that. Like when you're in overwhelm, the cure for overwhelm is nothingness. And new parents many people don't have time for nothingness. Like it's just not the option. So then it's trying to figure out these little pieces of things that we would realistically do and try. I have so many clients who are like, I feel my most focused when I work out in the morning. So I'm going to get up and work out every single morning. And I'm like, cool. Do you want to try that like one time this week? And they're like, well, I just feel better every time. I'm like, no, absolutely. That's really cool. But like to get started, should we try like what? Do you think Tuesday's probably your most realistic day that you could give that a go? And then maybe if it feels good, maybe try again on Thursday. And I mean, I have a good enough rapport with people that we can have these joking conversations. But it is because they just want that. And I'm with you and I hear you. And if I don't not on my phone first thing in the morning, then I'm feeling better for this, which leads to this, which leads to this. But if we set ourselves up to be doing it every day right away, we set ourselves up for a lot of failure. It's the same, I think, with all of this. I could go on like 8 tangents right now, but not tangents. They're related to this, but like how many places I want to go with it. Like I remember once when I was in grad school, I was like, I really need to start eating healthier. So one day I went and got to the bodega and got a salad and a carrot juice, which like I like carrots, but not to be juicing them and drinking it straight, like ma'am. And I went in, and one of my girlfriends, I was working in a field place with other mental health professionals. And she was like, Meg, do you really feel like that's realistic? Like, do you think that that's what you're going to just start eating now is salads and carrot juice? Also, let's talk about protein and a whole other conversation. But like, I was so motivated in that moment and I went and did it. And then she was like, you're going to be so hungry in a little bit. And then you're going to run and grab Oreos or whatever, because that's what's going to be available. And then you're going to feel like you failed. And then that momentum is going to be crushed. And that obviously has more to do with eating, but I think it's the same for a lot of these situations where people feel so motivated or so desperate for change
Mm.
But they're like, great, I'm going to do it every day. And we're here to tell you, my friends, like little pieces, little
Well, and
bit.
I think part of for some people too is like that all or nothing thinking or like perfectionism.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah. Hello.
I work with a lot of perfectionists. Like I am a recovering perfectionist. It's
Yes.
something I'm always addressing in my life. But I
Yes.
think our brain, again, this is where like that self-talk piece comes in of
Mhm.
like your perfectionist, the piece of your brain that's a perfectionist tells you you need to work out every morning
Uh-huh.
before you start your day, or your brain tells you, your perfectionist part tells you that it needs to look a certain level. And
Hmm.
so then it's like challenging that thought of like
Right.
just acknowledging like, okay, my perfectionist brain is telling me this, but what is reality? And it's probably a step down from that, or maybe
Right.
5 steps down from that.
Many steps down.
Yeah. And so, but I think like part of that is like for some people it's like like almost like grieving. Well, like I can't do like I can't do it
Oh my gosh,
perfectly.
yes. Yes.
And so being able to give yourself that permission of like it's going to look different than what my brain is expecting it to look like. Um,
Yes.
and so giving yourself credit for you worked out on Tuesday,
Uh-huh.
like that counts. It didn't have to be Monday through Friday. Like you
Yep.
can work your way up, but like starting with something that's realistic and feeling good about the first step versus like waiting until you're crossing the finish line to feel good. Like it has to feel good the whole
Yes.
way.
Yes. I love that. I love, are you familiar with Glennon Doyle?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, of course, we love. I actually referenced her show in my speech at Purdue, and somebody came up afterwards and was like, I'm obsessed with Glennon Doyle. I knew exactly which way you were talking about. And I was like, amazing. Yes. But yeah, and she had talked about her new diagnosis, and trigger warning if some eating disorder, disordered eating words are a trigger for you, but she talked about being diagnosed with anorexia, and they did a whole episode where they talked about like, I just found this out. We're processing it now. We don't even know the right language to use. So hang on afterward, because my therapist is going to go through and tell me all the stuff I said that's not appropriate, within the appropriate words. But she was really mentioned so many times. I think it's the most important to show people the beginning and show people the work, and show, instead of me coming to you in a year and talking about how I've overcome this thing, let me start out by saying I'm scared and it's new and I have no idea, and I am going to bring you all along on the ride with me. I think that's something that we struggle with, that perfectionist brain as well, of like, we theoretically know that it's okay to suck at things, especially when you're starting out, but we just don't allow ourselves to suck at things where there's no grace. It's 7 days a week or bust.
Yeah.
When really, I had an early client yesterday to make up for the days that I missed. So I worked out for 15 minutes yesterday, but I felt great after the 15 minutes. And normally I like to do 30 or 45. What privilege, but
Mm-hmm.
15 is better than nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us really struggle with that. And in different ways. Exercise for me, that's one where I'm like, anything's better than nothing, but come at
Mm-hmm.
me from somewhere else. And absolutely, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, no, and I think for a lot of people, like that credit piece is a challenge because many of us have been taught that like you get credit when you accomplish the thing,
Uh-huh.
um, or like when it's quote unquote perfect,
Right.
and so then it's like almost again that like self-talk piece that impacts our executive functioning, like
Mhm.
being able to reframe it and say, I'm going to give myself credit for starting, which is typically the hardest part on anything is getting started.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to give myself credit for when it doesn't go right and
Mhm.
I come back to it.
Mhm.
I'm going to give myself credit for the step I take after that. And I'm going to
Mhm.
give myself credit for asking for help, right? Like, so it's like this like constant credit giving so that you can almost like retrain your brain of like, these things are all valuable. Like it's not just when you accomplish the thing or when you finish the
Yeah.
task, or when you hit a certain metric, whatever that is. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Because a lot of us get in that mindset, especially those of us with ADHD or VAST or just, again, distractibility, but like that perfectionism. You're right. Like giving credit to those things. These things are important as well. And some of us are very used to those transitions or those learning processes being so quick
Hmm.
that if it's not an overnight success, if it's not a first, oh yes, you've explained, sine and cosine to me and I just get it, go team, then it's right, that I've
Yeah.
failed. And I love the
Right.
book. I literally have it sitting up on my stand over here, the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. And it's about the idea of growth mindset versus fixed. And like either you're born with intelligence or you're not. And it's just absolutely not true. While certainly some people are born to sing like Demi Lovato and some people sing like I do. But if I put effort and time and energy into that, I can always get better at singing.
Hmm.
And that what's one of my biggest thing people who this isn't their first episode of my show have heard me say before, like one of my biggest, I feel like patting myself on the back parenting accomplishments is teaching my kids to say I can't do it yet. Like, mama, can you help me? I can't do it yet. Like that, it's just I can't do this yet. I can't reach the sink yet. I can't tie this shoe yet, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I can't do it is an incorrect, it's not a finished sentence. And
Right.
you're right, like maybe I won't ever be able to fly a plane or whatever, but if that's something that you're passionate about and you can go to school and you can learn, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, and I
yeah,
think that's true for like executive functioning skills as well. Like this idea of like you have it or you don't, and then that's like
yes,
what your life is going to look like.
right.
Like it's definitely true that some people have a have stronger executive functioning skills just at baseline, like that's
Of
one of
course.
their strengths. And then there's lots of factors that influence people who have chronic challenges with executive functioning. So like ADHD, life experiences, stress, all sorts of different factors that can impact it. But it doesn't mean that you're not capable of building those skills. It just means that like you weren't given the right skills that match your brain.
Right,
Um, and so like I think basically we were all given the exact same set of tools in K through 12. Like
right.
use a calendar, write a to-do list, you now set an alarm on your phone, right? Like those are the basics.
Uh-huh.
And for some people, those are a great starting, you
Yes.
know, starting foundation. For some people, they're not going to work at all or ever. But
Yes.
it's told that this is what right? This should work for you. So you keep trying over and over and over again to use a system that doesn't match your brain, which creates even more frustration and that like shame and guilt of like other people have figured this out. Other people are using a calendar and I can't
Right.
yet. That's your yet. So it's figuring
Mhm.
out how like what tools don't work for you, which I'm guessing if you're struggling, you know which ones you're avoiding or which ones you're trying over and over again to make work.
Right.
But it's being able to coming back to that pivot and be like, okay, I'm going to try something new. And it's treating it like an experiment, because
Mhm.
it's like it's not, if the tool doesn't work, it's not you that's not making it work. It's the wrong tool for you.
Like not don't you don't have to say it again, but say it again. Like and people really struggle with that idea. Well, everyone else, I mean, don't let me get up on my soapbox, and I am not educated to have a better solution, so I'm also not going to gripe about something that I'm not offering a suggested fix. But like K-12 in the United States is just not set up like in England, for example. They major in 2 or 3 subjects in what we would consider the high school age. And that's, I want to hold some space for that's tough, because we also make the joke about how ridiculous it is to make 17-year-olds pick their life career, which again, that's not going to be your life career pivot, but
Mhm.
at such a young age, and then send them off to college, and they're supposed to be able to do all these things, and right. So I hold the space for that. I wanted to say that out loud, but like the idea that everyone has to be outstanding at every single thing. Like our valedictorian in my high school sucked at spelling. And like if he could have been able to just focus on, actually, so sorry, Daniel, I don't know what you do these days. But like if he could have just picked 3 or 4 subjects that were the things that he was really into, think about how much more expertise he could have had in those, how much more confident if he didn't have to focus on some of those things. And then you even come back to like kindergarten, and my son will be in kindergarten in 2 months. And it's not like, well, a little bit my baby, but more so just like he's just displaying some pretty classic signs like his mother and his father. And I just think the disservice that we do to these small children, where we take them and sit them in a room for 6 hours, and then we're frustrated with them because they won't sit still. And I do believe things are getting better. And I haven't had a child go into public school yet, so I'll learn a lot as I'm going. But K-12 is not set up for success for everybody. And that doesn't mean that you're unintelligent or incapable or lazy. That's a big one for ADHD, or disrespectful. It's that it's not set up, and none of these tools are working for everybody either. Like, I usually start people out with the Eisenhower matrix, but then I immediately tell them, and here's how I've evolved it for myself, because that thing didn't work for me, but it's a great place to start, right? Like, let's go here and let's see where we can branch out. But, and I can't say it enough, needs to be individualized, not one thing. But we feel like failures when we don't fit into the one thing that some person somewhere decided was the best way.
Yes.
I'm having a lot today. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Usually I'm like,
no, this is great.
More.
It's such an important conversation. And I think, like, to add to what you're talking about in terms of like K through 12 not fitting everybody, on the flip of that, like when adults are entering the professional world and choosing a career, you can choose something that, you know, aligns with your interests or your passions or whatever, and it still not be the right fit. Like, whether that's the environment is not the right fit, the way that your supervisor communicates with you isn't the right fit, the way that your day is structured isn't the right fit. Yet, add the yets to all in there.
Yes.
Like, so then it's figuring out, okay, how can I build on the strengths and, you know, stick with what I want to stick with, but allow myself to experience like this level of discomfort as I try something new or ask for help or make a pivot.
The distress tolerance of it all.
Yeah.
Which I do think people who are high functioning and perfectionists, we have a lower level of distress tolerance because we're so used to like, let me try this, and let me try track. I'm really fast. Let me try math. I understand how to do that. Like, so then when we have to try something, sorry, I'm saying we, like, oh my gosh, I'm so smart. But that really does resonate for me, because that was the thing. Like, I remember when I first got to a maths class where I was like, this doesn't just automatically make sense to me. I felt like a failure. I felt like I couldn't tell anybody because like I was one of the smart kids. Like, I was in the honors, I was in this, and like, there's something wrong with me. And it's like, no, we just don't learn everything the same. And things can be hard, but that distress tolerance, I think, is missing so much for some people.
Yes. Well, and I think that's like the distress tolerance and like frustration tolerance, like the ability to accept, like, I'm not going to know this or be good at this right away, ties in with like procrastination and being stuck. And I think I always talk about this, like those are two different things in my mind.
Yeah.
So both of them are wanting to avoid the uncomfortable feeling.
Sure.
So and we all procrastinate and we all get stuck, but some people it's way more chronic and it's way more impactful. And so I think it's also important just to name that, like, yes, this is a universal experience. I've never met somebody who's never procrastinated or never gotten stuck, but there is a group of people who this is like a chronic challenge, like very impactful in their life. And so, and those tend to be the people who go to coaching or go to therapy and get support and resources on that.
Right.
But I view like procrastination as it's something that you don't want to do. You're not connected with it. There's no like intrinsic motivation there. Like, it's something that just doesn't matter to you. So like, you procrastinate on taking out the trash, whatever that is. Like, eventually you will do it. Like, but we might wait, right? So that's procrastination. And then getting stuck is you really want to do the thing, but the thing is hard and uncomfortable. And maybe there's some fear of failure, or the perfectionism brain is really activating. And so you know that it's going to be uncomfortable. And like, even if you know exactly how to start, you like still can't get yourself to take that first step. So like, that to me, it's really important to separate that out, that's being stuck. So you are stuck. You are not like, technically they overlap, but you're not. Yes.
But like, I think it's important to parse out the difference between like getting stuck is also a form of procrastination, but procrastination is I'm not connected and I don't feel it, versus getting stuck of like, I can't move forward. And I think the more, again, like literally Brene Brown has a whole book on naming emotions. Like, the more that we can be intentional about the language we use, the more specific we can be about how we move forward from it. So I love this.
And I think it's so important that we use the words that align with like what the experience is. Like I'm a huge Brene Brown fan too.
You're a social worker. We
Obviously.
have to
So,
be.
yeah, you have to.
Yes.
But it's like the word procrastinating feels awful. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you're procrastinating, you're lazy. Like
There's so much stigma behind it
yes, like
because you're lazy.
yes, which is lazy is such like a heavy word. And so I think it's even just being able to challenge, like, okay, and we all do, we have lazy days, that's okay. But you're not lazy. Oh, like that's not, I have a
Rest
hard
is
time.
productive.
Yes, rest is always, yeah. But so it's like acknowledging that, like, if you're saying, oh, I'm procrastinating on this, thing that's so important to me, or I'm procrastinating on this thing that is so like, I want to do this. And to say that you're procrastinating on it feels like all the shame and guilt and like shoulds pop up. But
Uh-huh.
when you acknowledge, like, I'm stuck, like, stuck just hits, at least for me, it hits different of like, I want to do this. I am trying to figure out how to do this. Like, and then so it's like, what are the tools that will help me? Right. So then definitely the self-talk piece, and then being able to go to your toolbox of like, how will I get unstuck here?
Right.
Um, but it's both of them are discomfort tolerance,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then picking the right word for your situation.
Mm-hmm. I really love that. And it's interesting. I've had this conversation with people a lot recently, people in the older generations, where they're kind of like, oh, this, that, the other, tomato, tomato. And it's like, I hold space for that. I understand the frustration of having to try to change and make new things, or hold new space for things that you previously had a strong opinion about. I hear you, everything. It's all hard. Change is hard.
Mhm.
It really is important, though. That's the thing, going back to the Atlas of the Heart book, where it's like happy, sad, pissed off. There's so much more to that. There's so much
Mhm.
more to that. And I strongly believe that anger is a secondary emotion, which means you are angry because I'm angry because I'm left out. I'm angry because my feelings are hurt. I'm angry because I'm sad. And anger is a much more socially acceptable emotion than crying. And so it is, when it comes to those things that we say to ourselves, I just wonder how we can all help each other to unclench a little. And like, how do we allow ourselves the same thing that you would say to somebody else, a therapist trope? What would you say to your best friend? Like,
Right.
not for nothing do we say it, because we
Right.
have so much more grace for other people than we do for ourselves. And how's that working out for you, as my grandma would say?
Well, and I think that's like the unexpected piece for a lot of people when they are looking to learn about executive function coaching, or how to build up their executive function skills and toolbox. Like the way that I view it is like, you really can't pick a tool or try a new tool until you've start talking to yourself differently, which starts with like noticing it. So like noticing where the shoulds are popping up, or
Mhm.
where, maybe you have this, it's like ingrained in you to think like, oh, if I can't start something, I'm lazy, or if I don't get it right the first time, I'm incapable of learning, right? Like these things that we might be holding pretty deeply, and not even aware of until you work through it in therapy, and maybe transition over to coaching. But
Yeah.
it really does start with like building a new muscle memory of like noticing when that thought pops up, having an alternative thought to replace it or challenge it, and
Mhm.
then being able to take the action with like the tool that you're trying, like that you're
Yes.
experimenting with.
Yes.
um and then having like a community of people who get it, because I think a lot of the women that I talk with, especially, on like, at first glance it looks like they have everything together, like they're working really, really, really hard to, and maybe people don't know that they're struggling
Well,
with
all that
some,
masking, right?
all this thing, yeah.
And
And
again,
so
sorry for my quick interjection, but just going to the masking, like I've said this so many times recently. I'm gonna say it again. I'm so lucky. I was so obnoxious in school, all A's and a B in conduct, all A's and a B in conduct. I was so obnoxious at school that like my parents, I don't know, I don't want to say that's why, but like my parents were able to take me to a psychiatrist, and they took them seriously, and I was able to get diagnosed in fourth grade, like in the
mm,
90s. And even now, girls don't have ADHD, girls don't have autism, girls are not girls are neurotypical.
yeah.
Period. End of story. And so therefore we learned to mask. I didn't. Clearly I did not. But it's wild, like, and that's why so many people are getting diagnosed, or at least being more aware of the variable attention trait, like in their 20s, 30s, 40s, because they've been so good at masking for so long and they're sick of spinning the plates.
Yes. Yeah. And I think for a lot of those women, it's really like, for some people, there's again, like that, the grieving of like, oh my goodness, what does this mean? But for a lot of people that I work with, it's validating. Like, oh, there is a name for what I'm experiencing. And there are other people who get it, and there are resources for this.
Yes.
And so I think for a lot of people, it's figuring out like what then, as you're learning about yourself, like what changes do you want to make, if any? And sometimes it is like that for most people, it's the self-compassion piece of like, I know why things are so challenging. Like, there's nothing wrong. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's not that you don't care. It's that your brain is wired in a way that you need different resources, different tools, different stimuli.
Dax Shepard talks on his show a lot about, not a lot recently, but I guess I'm thinking back to when he was first on. He has dyslexia, and he has also a degree in anthropology. And so he talks about, that reptile brain. And then of course, as we got communities evolved and whatnot, but like the hive mind piece of it, like people with dyslexia were meant to go and do certain things, whereas other people with certain brain structures and abilities were meant to do other things. And now, again, coming back to the conversation we were having, like we're all just meant to go to K-12. We're all just meant to go to college. We're all meant to go get a job right out of school. We're all meant to go do these exact same things over and over again. And to stray from that is a failure. And I do believe the pendulum is swinging away from that. I do believe that we're aware of like college doesn't have to be for everybody. Like that's okay. Or being able to hopefully have some more accommodations for people. But it's based in anthropology that people were able to have certain things that were different, but we now just live in a different society where those traits and features and skills are less valued by the greater society. Which is our loss. It's not your fault. That's our loss.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think it's like even working with people who've like pivoted careers, right? Like, oh, I've tried this and then I went to a new job, or I can't seem to stick with anything. And so it's like even checking in to be like, well, is that working for you? Like if you enjoy changing your career every 2 to 3 years and that fits for you, your life financially, your interests, like if that fits your lifestyle, then like, and you're happy with it, then keep doing if it's working for you. If it's not, and that's where you're like, okay, I can't keep a job because I burn out, or because I, haven't built up systems and I feel like I've missed the boat on whatever, then, okay, then let's address it and like come up with something that works for you. But I think it's like, just even checking in on like, am I trying to fit what society wants versus am I doing something that fits for me?
Right.
Like so many people I work with are like, oh, I can't stick with one hobby. I like keep bouncing around. I never finish anything, kind of like in quotes.
That is on our flag. That is our main thing. I can't tell you how many times I'm a crafter and how much like my crafting pile of stuff that I finish, and then and then it does feel like a failure because you started it, but then you're like, well, it's not serving me anymore, and certainly we don't want to just waste materials. But that is like our number one, not number one, I shouldn't say, but that is like on the flag.
But I think it's even, and so then like checking in, like, sometimes might serve you, like that, like reframing it, like I'm a multi-passionate person. I read or heard it somewhere, like somebody's hobby was starting things.
Okay, I love that though, because again, so not to say that there's anything wrong with people who have been in one job. My husband was in a job for 16, 17 years, same company, different jobs. But even again, recently I was talking to somebody and they were saying like, I had this amazing job, but like every 2 years I got a different job. So it was in the same company, but I was never bored because I was always doing new things. That's great. Like, but we have this still, we're hanging on to this, I don't want to say archaic, but this older generation idea of you start working right out of high school and you stay there and you get your pension and you're there forever. And that works for some people and they're very happy.
Mhm.
But like job hopping, air quotes, is seen as such a thing. Craft hopping, hobby hopping. You're supposed to collect stamps, and that's the only thing you do. You're the person who collects stamps, or you put ships in a bottle, and that's the thing you do. You're the person who puts ships in a bottle.
Mhm.
And that's cool if you're the person who puts ships in a bottle, but it's not the same thing as I tried some ships in a bottle and I made a couple and that was really fun. And now it's next. That's cool too. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's even like reframing that too, as like you're somebody that can start new things and try new things.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I was talking to a client the other day about like motivation. Like she was saying,
Yes.
like, I'm just not motivated. And it was particularly around like her goal of organizing her space. But
Uh-huh.
then I was asking her, I was like, so what are you doing? Like, what does your day look like? And she's like, well, I've been researching this and like doing this complex reading and thinking and tying together these concepts. And I was like, okay, so there is motivation there. Like, checking in just at, like, again, recognizing at baseline, there might be some mental health things that impact motivation globally, but this was
Sure, of
not
course.
her case. I was like, so you have motivation for complex learning, and you currently don't have motivation for cleaning like all of your paperwork. So I was like, let's just challenge that of like, you do have motivation. It's just not for the thing that you feel like you should be doing.
Right.
Um,
There's that shit again.
yeah, right. In air quotes. And so then it's like, okay, well, if you're somebody who's multi-passionate, like you start lots of things. So it's even just being able to acknowledge like when there's motivation, energy, dopamine, your brain lights up and does the thing.
Right.
And when something like organizing your desk doesn't give you dopamine, your brain isn't going to light up automatically. And so it's figuring out, how can I approach this differently or think about this differently so that I can do the thing, because we do need to clean our desk or put away laundry. It's the biggest one, I think, that people are like, embarrassed to almost talk about. But it's like,
Yeah.
so it's just recognizing that like your brain is wired to go to certain things and to want to avoid discomfort. And
Mm-hmm.
so just like acknowledging like part of that is brain wiring. And
Mm-hmm.
so then you get to figure out different strategies, tools, ways to get yourself activated. Yeah.
I wanted to go back. You've mentioned it twice now. And as soon as you said it the first time, I was like, let's jump into that. Because I want to talk about the idea of, because you said your brain's just not wired that way. And you talked before about grieving the idea of perfection, grieving the idea of what you thought, like the idea of giving yourself credit, but like grieving that loss of perfection. How do you
Mhm.
help people navigate the energy of that's just not how your brain is wired? We have
Mm.
all these, again, and I wanted to say it earlier, but then we went off somewhere else, but like we have all these external messages about like putting your laundry away is the epitome mark of an adult. And
Mhm.
who says that? Who's telling you that? I
Yeah.
mean, certainly our moms because they're moms because they're moms and so on, or parents. And it's not a bad thing, because if I never put my laundry away, I bet my spouse would probably be unhappy with that. And so, of course, we don't want to be a bull in an antique shop and running through other people's lives.
Mhm.
Fine. But the thing that laundry may not be the best example, but the things that we are supposed to be doing, is that an internal message? Do we really genuinely believe that this is the mark of my success or me, whatever, so let's just say success globally? Or is that because that's what I was told from TV and my family and society? And so how do we divorce ourselves from that concept? And
Yep.
then if we really do believe that that's something that we want to do, how do we grieve that idea? Like, what does that look like? What does
Yeah.
grieving look like?
That's such a big question.
I know
So
I'm
I
like, give me a full therapy. No.
Well, so I think it is. So part of it is like, again, that self-talk piece of like, what is your brain automatically telling you,
Mhm.
right? The thought that like is just popping up on its own. Like I should, in air quotes, be able to do this thing, whatever that might be. And then your question of like, is that an external message? Like society has told you, you should be able to sit down at your desk and respond to your emails at 9 a.m. And so that,
That's a good one too. The timeline piece, like we're
yes.
maybe not all meant to wake up at 6 a.m. and go to work.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
So
interruption, but I was like, also
no,
that.
no, I can tie it. I'll tie time into it because I think it is. So it's you know, I think for a lot of it, there is mostly an external message that has like put this into your brain as an auto populate. You should be able to start doing emails at 9 a.m. And so then we internalize that of like, everybody else around me is sitting down at 9 a.m. to do their emails. Why can't I sit down at 9 a.m. to do my emails? And so I think for some people, then it like becomes like like a decision tree of like, do I want or need to be able to sit down and do my emails at 9 a.m.? Like either my job demands it. I want to be able to do that. Like this is something I want to try. Or do you like divert the other way and say, sitting down at 9 a.m. to do emails doesn't work for my brain. My brain is not wired to do a boring or demanding or overwhelming task first thing in the morning, let alone maybe your brain doesn't want to be awake at 9 a.m. Because you're up till 3 maybe. So the two camps are like, I'm going to try to make this work, or I'm going to pivot to a different way of doing something that'll fit for me. And so I think a lot of my clients have fallen into either of those, or even like a third category of like, I'm not doing the thing at all. And I'm feeling overwhelming shame and guilt. And eventually this is going to catch up with me.
Right.
And so I think it's being able to look at that self-talk piece, and starting with like kindness and like permission towards ourselves of like, this is a hard thing. My brain is not, and understanding the brain piece of it, I think is huge. Like you may not have that type of like problem solving energy, or like your brain might need a big dopamine kickstart to get the day going. So being able to like kind of acknowledge that, and then go through the process of like, what do I want to try? Do I want to try to make 9 a.m. emails work? And if so, what does that look like? Do I want to try a different system of, I know I can't do like the 9 a.m. emails just haven't been working for me. So I'm going to start with this other project that really boosts my mood and gets me going, and communicate with my team and say, hey, I will be responding to your emails, but it's not going to be until noon. Like if it's time sensitive,
Right.
you know, ping me this other way.
But that's why we have text messaging and Slack bots and Office, whatever. I don't know. I don't have any coworkers right now. I'm drawing a blank on all the things we used to message each other on, but you know,
Yeah.
you all know what I'm talking about.
All the tech. So I think it's like,
I do want to say, sorry, before we move on from that, because I do want to say I've had that conversation with clients about turning some of that stuff off, because when you finally do get into that thing and you've put your train on the track and it's going, and then those messages come in. So even articulating that, like, I will be offline for the next 30 minutes or however long it is.
Yep.
I understand not everybody has the luxury of that, because you're not the boss at the place or whatever it might be, but where you're able to be able to turn those things off. So making it make sense for you. I just wanted to acknowledge that, because some people are like, I can't not respond to emails till noon, but
right. Well, and I think that's where then having, again, recognizing everybody has different work structures and abilities to adjust things, but then it's having a conversation with people to say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is, depending on how transparent you want to be with coworkers, like these are some of the challenges I'm having. This is how I'm working through them. Like this type of communication would be beneficial to me. Or can we do X, Y, Z? So I think like a lot of systems too that we don't really talk about is advocacy and boundary setting. So whether it's like asking for what you need, sharing clearly what would be helpful, or letting people know like this is not something that fits for me, or this is something I need to adjust. And again, recognizing not all workplaces are going to be able to accommodate. But I think that's like a huge piece of figuring out tools and systems, like because there is no perfect, it's like putting puzzle pieces together. There might be a puzzle piece missing, or Tetris has been you're not going to get the perfect line. There's going to be a hole somewhere. And so when there's a hole, being able to just like say, okay, what do I need to do about that hole? Let somebody know, or practice more kindness, whatever that might be.
I mean, communication is key, right? I always say to clients, no matter what the topic is, like, there is nothing to be ashamed of, and it's nobody's business. So where does each person in your life fall on that spectrum of it's none of your business, hi, nice to see you, good morning, and there's nothing to be ashamed of, let me tell you all of my stories. And
Yeah.
everyone falls differently on that spectrum. You know, ADHD in schools, you can get a 504 plan. So you can get extra time or a different testing location if the distractibility is an issue. And certainly for the ADA, again, not everything can be, if you're working like, you know, in the emergency department at a hospital, it can't be like, you know, I just can't run into that room right now because I'm like, fair enough.
Right.
Space. But there are a number of places where if you were able to articulate that, if you're able to be vulnerable and express that to your supervisors, if they have that sort of environment, and saying like, this is the thing that's going to work the best for me. Where can you, like, this is my ideal situation. Where can you meet me?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Being able to kind of open up that conversation if it's comfortable, or even if it's uncomfortable, like recognizing that it might not be a comfortable first ask,
Right.
but seeing, is there like a middle ground here? And I think that's true even outside of work. Like a lot of my
Yes.
clients do have stress around communicating, making plans with friends, loved ones,
Yes.
partners, kids. And so it's, how do you communicate where you're at? Like, how do you decide what level you're comfortable with? And I think some of that is an experiment. Like might look different talking with different people.
Mhm.
But again, like almost recognizing, well, what are the external messages I've been getting about XYZ? I think for a lot of people, it does come down to like, I haven't texted this person back. And now I've waited too long and I'm feeling, shame, guilt. I'm not a good friend, whatever, that brings up.
Right.
And I think people are like surprised, like that's executive functioning.
Right.
Like that's being able to, think flexibly, to start task initiation, start something. Decision making is executive functioning. I can't respond to their text because they're asking me when I'm free.
Right.
And I have to look at the calendar and there are
Yes.
some unknowns. So I have to wait. Maybe some all or nothing thinking pops up. I have to wait until I know exactly what my schedule is going to be.
Yes.
So it's
because
like,
we can't ask for more time or more space because we have to be perfect, because we have to have the answer always right away, first shot. And it can't
yeah,
be, saw your text, we'll get back to you. This is the answer and this is what's happening. And again, we're walking away from perfection with saw your text and we'll get back to you. And I want to take a little pop out for, again, the Perinatal Podcast energy of it all, and decision fatigue with parenting, especially with default caregivers. Like, it is literally my job in life where I have an opinion or have the ability to make a decision to not make another mother make a decision. Like, hey, Meg, when you all come over, should we go swimming first or should we eat first? Oh, I don't know. Actually, no. My then 2-year-old will be a gremlin if we don't eat. Let's eat and then swim, right? Because then she doesn't have to make another decision that revolves around her 3 children. Boom. Now, I'm not saying that I do that all the time, because sometimes I also have decision fatigue, but I want to hold all of the space for that as well, because those things come in together. If you don't have ADHD and some of these things don't apply to you, but that is also a thing. And then you're recognizing that you're participating in some of these patterns as well.
decision fatigue is so real. And I don't think people like realize that if they haven't put that term to it or thought about it in that way. Like, I think, we're quick to be like, oh, burnout, or, oh, like mental fatigue or brain fog, all of those things.
But again, here we are being intentional about our language, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So all of those things stand alone, but they also all come together and converge at decision fatigue. And so being able to acknowledge, like, you make thousands of decisions a day, thousands. Maybe it's not quite, I think it's thousands. Like all these micro decisions of.
No, but literally just think about, I'm gonna, those of you who are not on YouTube, like, I have to make a decision whether or not it's important enough for me to wipe my nose on screen right now. Like that, how many times have I done that? Those of you who are on YouTube, if you have been watching, you're like, man, Meg's touching your nose a lot. Yes, the allergens in Indiana wrecked me, even though my allergies here are also terrible. But I'm like, I'm on camera. Like, think how many times, even just that, and that's work and that's not related to my kids, but like, how many times am I going to touch my nose today on this screen? Think about the things like, do I want caffeinated or decaf? Do I need to go get some more water? Can I hold this pee through this meeting, or can I ask to get up? decisions, 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 decisions. Like, give yourself more credit because you're not thinking about all the things that you have to do to make a decision to get through the day. It's a
It
thousand,
is,
sure.
it's so true. It is so true. No, all of those are decisions, whether or not you like actually thought about it until you said it right now. Like, we're constantly making decisions, and that we each have a threshold for like how many decisions we can make. And then that's impacted by, what our day looked like, how much rest we got, what our stress level is, what our self-care has been, all of the other executive functioning stuff that we've done that day, like planning, organizing. I mean, that's all decisions, right? And so then it's like, you get to the end of the day. This happened to me yesterday. If you're a business owner, like, all the decisions fall onto you. And I was at TJ Maxx in the checkout line, and I was like, I'm going to treat myself to a candle. And I stood there smelling the candles and literally could not choose a candle. And I was like, and that's to me is my red flag of like, I'm an indecisive person, but I wanted a candle, and I was like, this is getting stressful. I'm just not going to buy a candle. And then that was the decision. The decision was, I'm not going to make a decision. There is no decision to be made.
No decision.
I don't need a candle, right? And it's such a small, minuscule thing in my life. Like, I'm fine without the candle, but like,
but it's an important example.
Yeah.
Be willing to let go of things that you don't need. That I like. Self-care through subtraction is such a big deal. Like, you could have stood there for another 3 to 5 minutes and force yourself to make that, because that's what people do. People make decisions and they know what their favorite scents are, and you are messed up because your neurospicy brain can't make a decision. No, I'm just not I'm gonna walk away.
Yep.
That's okay.
And that was, so like in the past, that would have like been a straw. Oh my gosh, why couldn't I have made that decision? Or I would have like stayed there longer and like randomly gotten stressed for no reason over buying a candle. Again, like such a small life example. But I think
it's a perfect example though, because it's even something as insignificant perhaps as a candle, but look at the stress that it did cause you, that you could have allowed to cause more, but you stopped yourself and made an intentional choice to walk away. Whereas a lot of people listening right now who haven't had your amazing services see that as a failure, so they have to stay, and then look at the turmoil that we've caused. So I think it's actually the perfect example where it's like, oh, if I could do that with candles, could I also maybe do that with something else at work that's a little more important, but also.
Yeah. Well, and like I was able to walk out of TJ Maxx and be like, okay, I didn't buy a candle. Bummer. But at the same time, now I know I need to make easier or less decisions or offload some of my decisions for the rest of the day. Like, and so it's like, what's for dinner? I don't know, because I didn't make that decision earlier, and it's been a week of decision making for me. But so I was like, okay, I'm going to go to like what I know is my light, easy lift, and go to, and then I don't have to make a decision. So then being able to just know, even for myself today, I had grand plans of I was going to jumpstart my day, work on this project that I've been working on, but I knew it was a decision heavy project. And so I woke up this morning and said, today is not the day for me to make lots of decisions or to try to force myself to make decisions. So I'm not going to like blame or shame or guilt myself that like I'm not in a decision energy today. Today, I'm going to do things that require no decisions, which was just like for me doing like light cleaning, no decisions. Like I was like, I know exactly. And for me, cleaning is a light lift, sometimes, not always. But I was like,
every day is different, but yes.
Every day is different. But I was like, I gave myself that permission. Like in the past, I would have been like, let that hang over me. I would have felt like crap. I couldn't do the thing I said I was going to do today. But it's acknowledging like, okay, if I tried to make lots of decisions, I would have maybe not made them at all, felt more burnt out, spent extra time and energy on something, and felt worse about it. So like giving myself that permission of, I'm not going to let myself feel this way. I'm going to schedule it next week, and I'm going to do something today that gives me a little bit of dopamine and be okay with that.
I mean, you're just really setting yourself up for more success, because if you force yourself to do something and you do it, then you're just causing more stress, but then you've left more space or more gas in the tank or whatever analogy to do something else where you can be successful instead of forcing yourself to stay over here and putting all of that emotional, intellectual labor that way. I love
Yeah.
the Jim Quick quote, if you had 40% and you gave 40%, you gave 100%.
Me too. Yeah, that's such a
I'm
good.
obsessed with it. I hold space with the fact how frustrating it is of like, I showed up to this thing and I wanted to have 100% or 90% and I only have 40%. And that's frustrating because you know you are capable of more. So we'll hold some space for that. And that is also where we are right now. We can do nothing to change it. So I'm giving my 100% because this is all I've got right now. And that's what I'm going to do. And I think
Yeah.
that's so helpful. And then I did want to also hold space, like you and I are business owners, which is great. So sometimes we have the ability to be like, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to go stuff my daughter's pinata for her birthday. Like not everyone has that option, but then if that option is not available to you because you don't run your own business or whatever that is, ask for help. Can we get
Yeah.
to the space where we allow ourselves to ask for help? I'm stuck here. I've tried this. I'm not sure how to move forward. What would you do? This, that. Asking for help is okay, but
Yeah.
we are perfectionists and we are amazing and we're high achievers, so we don't need help. So we never ask for help. And then that's where we get stuck here again. If you can't just offload something, asking for help, get somebody else's 10%, get somebody
Yeah.
else's 10%. Then we've gotten up to 60, like,
Yeah.
yay.
Yeah. And it's about, I think it's like practicing that too. Like if it's like, if you wait until you're, like me, the day after not being able to buy a candle and you're like, I'm so burnt out, the idea of asking for help just feels like this big, massive thing. So it's when you're in a good space too, practicing like where are some opportunities
Yes.
for help when I'm feeling okay. Like I'm not in my crisis mode. I'm not in my burnout mode. I'm going to just practice asking for help. Same
Mhm.
with like experiencing discomfort. Like I'm going to do something that I know I might not be good at right away when
Yeah.
I'm in a good mental health space, good energy space, to just acknowledge like I'm going to do something new, hard, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable so that when it is the day after you can't buy a candle, okay, I've done hard things before. I have a data point
Yes.
and this is what I'm
Yes.
going to do about it.
That's the same as with any, yeah, thank you. Yes, Meg, let it breathe. Yes. And that's that same thing about like any of the coping skills that we talk about, anything with mental health, with therapy, with unpacking, with anything. The
Mhm.
idea of doing it when you're not in the most distress, showing yourself like, you know what? I'm not at a 40%. I'm actually at a 70%. But how would it be if I actually asked somebody for help and got somebody else's opinion or got some feedback or offloaded something? Oh, wow, I didn't die. I asked for help and I didn't die and I didn't get fired and nobody thinks I'm a horrible person. Wow. So then when you are at your 40, 30, 20%, whatever those numbers are, and those numbers are all up to you individually, right? Um, you're more likely to do that. When you're in your highest level of stress, of decision fatigue, or whatever else it might be, you're less likely to ask for help because you've never practiced. But if instead you're just like, hey, I'm actually okay with making the meal plan for the week, but let me ask my spouse to have some opinions too, because why is it always all my job? It doesn't have to be my job.
Mhm.
And then when you are actually stressed out, you might feel more inclined to be able to do it as well.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
love that.
It's giving your brain a new data point because your brain has lots of data points of times that it hasn't worked or that it's created more stress or that like you write it your brain has lots of data points that don't serve you. And
Mhm.
so it's about building up those data points for yourself of I can do the thing. And the more you do it, the lighter of a lift it becomes, even when you are in that crisis mode.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like I could keep you here for a whole hour. I don't know. No, you don't have to commit to it now, but maybe I'll have you back because I honestly feel like
I
we
would
could
love that.
just keep going, but I also would be respectful of your time.
No, I would
Um,
definitely love to
honestly,
chat. Yeah, let's schedule another one.
I really appreciate it so much. I love the idea too. I don't know if I've ever articulated it so succinctly in the idea of like grieving the idea of the perfection, like really being intentional about using that language for it and holding space for that idea. And just a number of the things. So I know everyone here is appreciative, like, yes, oh my gosh, I feel seen, or maybe I could actually try to give myself some different space to operate. So can you please let everyone know where they can find you? I'll put it in the show notes.
Yes. So I'm active on Instagram. My handle is Executive Functioning First. And then my website is executivefunctioningfirst.com. So those are the two places that you can find me. If you're curious about working together, I offer one-on-one coaching. I also have 2 coaches on my team. The most important thing about coaching, similar to therapy, is that the fit needs to be right. So if working with me or somebody else on my team isn't the right fit, I can point you in the direction of other executive function coaches.
Yes.
I also have a coaching membership called the Stuck to Started Society, which is like if somebody's curious about coaching or looking for a community, there's monthly workshops, hot seat coaching, and a community of people who get it.
That is
So
really cool. A
the
very
different,
necessary and useful tool for people. I think, again, the more we feel normalized and validated, the better. And
yes, yeah,
some more tools, tips, and tricks of what worked for other people. Let me try that. This piece worked, this piece didn't.
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for sticking with us through the whole episode. Like I said, I'm definitely gonna have to have you back because I think I've got another 60 minutes of bothering you to do. So everyone, thanks so much for showing back up to the Perinatal Podcast. Remember, be curious, not judgmental, and we'll see you next time.